And now, more of my interview with former President Bill Clinton and writer James Patterson about their political thriller, The President is Missing. I sat down with them yesterday. President Bill Clinton, James Patterson. The book is
charged.
The book is The President is Missing. A former president of the United States, a fabulously successful writer. Who calls the shots when you're working together on a book?
Well, I think we know who's better at this. He's one of the world's great storytellers, but we both wanted to do it, and our lawyer/agent/friend Bob Barnett suggested we do it. And when he mentioned it to me, he said, "I've been trying to get you to write a thriller for years, and you're never going to do it. You're too busy with your foundation. So why don't you do one with James Patterson?" I said, "He'd never do that, never." So Bob talked to him. He said, "Yeah," and we just started. And I told him he was going to have to do a little hand-holding in the beginning because I've read thousands of thrillers, I guess, by now, but I didn't know how to do it. But we started with an outline, and he said, "Okay, here's 20 questions you got to answer and to make this authentic."
I didn't tell him there'd be another 20 after that.
And so we started working, and then every draft, we traded back and forth, sometimes several times.
You know, when Bob came to me, we both grew up in small towns. But my small town, nobody ever came. But when I was 8 or 9 years old, Eisenhower came to town, President Eisenhower. And I never forgot that. I never forgot that. And I also tried to never forget where I came from and never get a big head because of whatever. I don't think anybody should get big heads about anything, but I really tried not to do that. So when I got the opportunity to write a book with President Clinton, I jumped at it, and to spend a year with him, which has been fabulous.
This is a book about a president. Starts out, he's facing an impeachment hearing, something you know about President Clinton. He's also confronting an international terrorist threat that implausibly he decides to deal with himself. He has to...
Not implausible in terms of the book, though. In terms of the story, in terms of why he decides to do that. But yes, implausible in terms of even when we talked about it, the president said, this would be irresponsible, except under this kind of circumstance.
Well, that's what I want to ask you about, because he has to ditch the Secret Service, President Clinton, in order to go and do this thing on his own. That would never happen, would it?
Well, it never has happened. In the book, we explained what the law appears to be, which is that anybody except the president who's covered by the Secret Service, including members of the president's family, can sign off the coverage and assume the risk, normally for a very specific purpose at limited time. If you read this book, you'll see there's a very specific reason he thinks he has to do it. And he acknowledges that it won't be very long, but that this is a cybersecurity novel, so that things happen fast, the clock's ticking, he has to make a decision, and he thinks he's doing the right thing. But in general, you wouldn't do it. And you see why you shouldn't do it with the consequences that flow.
There is an incredibly devastating attack launched toward the United States. If something like that happened, this is how it would happen. There's an attack on a presidential motorcade. If it happened, it would happen like this. The president goes missing. If that, inconceivable as that might normally be, if it happened, this is how it could happen.
The theme of the book is around, as you said, a cyber attack, a cyber threat. Is it fair to say, President Clinton, that you think that is now the most serious kind of potential threat this country faces?
Well, of course, a nuclear, chemical, or biological attack could kill more people more quickly. But I think it is more likely that a serious cyber attack could do a massive amount of damage and be successful.
Currently, we have a very large defense budget which is getting larger, but only a very small part of it is designated towards cyber defense. And I think we both think that we need to re-examine that in terms of how big that piece should be.
And this is one way of educating the public.
We're trying to do something that you don't normally do. Can you write a legitimate thriller that's really fun to read and faithful to the way it would unfold, and also makes a point that makes people more interested in this cybersecurity thing, because anything electronic can be hacked, and that's the point we're trying to make here.
And it's not just that it goes off temporarily, it can be erased. All your bank records, Wall Street, all of it, it could be erased. That's what really makes this scary. We tried to create a president that would remind people how important this job is, how stressful this job is, so that when people go, I'm not being political here, but when people go out to vote, they would really think about that a lot, even in the midterm elections, that when they go out there, they're going to elect people to Congress. This is governorships. This is really important stuff. This is not, and these people are not silly. They're not villains. They want to do an important job, and let's be real careful about who we elect.
One of the other points, I guess you could say, moments of education comes through in the theme of dysfunction in Washington. One of the things that is surrounding this president, this fictional President Duncan. And at the end of the book, he laments, quote, I'm quoting, the downward drift into tribalism, extremism, and seething resentment, us versus them, a blood sport. The well of trust runs completely dry. I guess my question to you is, though, with President Trump's success, isn't that here to stay for the foreseeable future?
Well, for a while it is. But I think, I think in the campaign, for example, I believe that I attacked him less personally than anybody else. I always said, look, this election's about you. Here's why you should be for Hillary, 1, 2, 3. I think everybody should be trying to recapture that. For example, I think we should be rooting for him to succeed with Korean negotiations. I don't like having to brag on the dictatorial proclivities of the North Korean leader, but I think the South Korean president has been a genius, the way he's kind of gotten them together, and I think anything we can do to reduce that threat is a positive thing.
We're watching this summit that looks like it's going to take place between President Trump and the North Korean leader. Do you believe the North Koreans, you've dealt with them, are prepared to completely dismantle their nuclear weapons program?
Maybe, maybe not, but even if they're not, if they're prepared to have an inspection regime which would give us greater confidence that the nuclear material, the fissile material, and any technology would be identified, monitored, and couldn't be given or sold to anyone else, that would be worth doing.
You have said, you've continued to say you believe that NAFTA was the right thing to do, that the benefits outweigh the disadvantages. However, your party just has steadily moved in the direction of protectionism. So my question is, that's the political reality, isn't it, on trade?
Yeah. People will tend to resent any force that is not helping them. So who cares if trade's helping somebody else? Who cares if technology's helping somebody else? I get that. I do think NAFTA needs to be upgraded. It's 25 years. There's all the technological and other changes. I think there's plenty of room for them to, both sides to say they got something done, they can redo this. We pretty well know what's going to be hurt in a trade agreement, who'll be helped, who'll be hurt. We should get our money on the front end from now on. But otherwise, I still believe in trade.
You're going to do another collaboration together after this one? You're going to write a second
We've had a lot of fun
Patterson
doing
Clinton
it.
book?
It's been a tremendous experience for both of us. It's being fun, out here and doing interviews and big crowds and really positive crowds.
I was thrilled, at my age to try something new.
He's probably got a detective series started already on the
Spending
side.
35 years reading all these mysteries, all of a sudden I got to help write one. It was fabulous.
Well, gentlemen, the book is The President is Missing. Thank you very much for talking with me. James Patterson, President Bill Clinton.
Thank you.
Thank you both. And you can watch the first part of my interview, including President Clinton's comments about Monica Lewinsky. That's on our website, pbs.org/newshour.